Welcome back. The issue of labor and organized labor, we should say, and the federal government is heating up. Today is just the very first day and things are already happening. Let's tell you what is the direct impact of that strike action that began today. The transmission company of Nigeria is now informing the general public, all of us, that the labor union has shut down the national grid, resulting in blackout nationwide. So in case you do not have light, we just told you why. The national grid was shut down at about 2:19 a.m. Nigerian time earlier this morning, June the 3rd. And so they've been trying to restore it, but it seems like it's not working yet. So, but they're just trying to inform everyone that this is the reason for the blackout we're experiencing across the country today. And, well, we'll continue to monitor what's going on in the country as far as the issue of labor is concerned. But we'll switch gears now for a moment to talk about something kind of related as well, because at the end of the day, if the federal government agrees with labor, the federal government will pay, state government will pay, local government will pay. It's across board. Whatever is agreed is going to be binding, depending on what the resolution is. We're talking about the issue of states and local government delivering on the dividends of democracy. Most of the time when we talk about governance, a lot of focus is on the federal government, but we hardly talk about the states, which is why we're focusing on them today, as well as the local government. We've been joined on the program by the National Coordinator of Democracy Vanguard, Mr. John Mutu, joins us from our Abuja studio, as well as Mr. Giwa. Victor Giwa is a legal practitioner. He joins us from our Abuja studio. And right here in our Lagos studio, we have Olusegun Lemon. He's Executive Director, Paradigm Leadership Support Initiative. Mr. Lemon, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me. Happy to join.
And gentlemen, I must say thank you so much for coming on the program. Let's come to you, Mr. Giwa, on this particular one. You're the legal practitioner. So let's have your take on the issue of the back and forth between labor. Labor is saying we are not backing down. We've given you 31 days to come up with a price or an amount, but we don't like what you're proposing. Government is now saying you're following the line of illegality and there are consequences for whatever action you are taking. Where do we go from here? Let's take that before we talk about the issue of state and local government, if you don't mind.
Well, thank you very much and good morning. It's unfortunate that we are at this point, and not only is it unfortunate, it's laughable. Now, we should remember the issue of minimum wage was one of the components of the engagement between the federal government and labor last year, sometimes in October 2023, when the Nigerian Labour Congress and the TUC, they were dealing with the issue of removal of fuel subsidy, which this government announced, during its swearing in and all of that. And one of the key points by the memorandum of understanding that was signed between the federal government and the NLC was one that they are going to look at the issue of minimum wage. If you could remember, there was this thing of paying 35,000 naira to federal government staffs, 25,000 naira to 15 million Nigerians, and some other packages that the government were going to do. The government also mentioned as part of their MOU that they were going to have things like incentive reduction of taxes, value-added taxes will not be paid on diesel for 6 months and all of that. I mean, you will see something like, oh, we are going to play down on taxes. But what did we have? What did federal government come up with? There's an increase in tariff. Not just minimal increase, a 200% increment in tariff for the electricity. I mean, I don't understand. You have removed fuel subsidy. The prices of all components of items in Nigeria has increased. The denominator, the minimum wage of workers, have not increased. Just like they argued, you have devalued the naira. As at the time you came in, dollar was 430. As at now, dollar is about 1,600.
Mr.
I mean,
pardon me.
It's also surprising that...
yeah, pardon me, Mr. Giwa. So the part we need your legal guidance on as well. Yes, this touches everybody, so the economy is quite touching. But the legality or otherwise, which the Attorney General said, well, there's a June order saying that Labour should not embark on a strike as far back as last year, and Labour is going on a strike. So which is legal, which is not?
Okay, I saw the memo from the Attorney General quoting section 41.2 and 42.1 of the Trade Union Dispute Act. Basically, he's talking about the 15 days notices that was supposed to be given by trade union before embarking on a strike. And it also makes reference to the fact that section 18 of the Trade Union Act that talks about issue of disputes, resolution, section 4.6 of the Trade Union Dispute Act that talks about settlements, that when there are engagements, you are not supposed to avoid taking a strike. And also when that dispute has been referred to the National Industrial Court. But with respect to the Attorney General and his letter, the Labour Union has given out notices of their strike earlier before now. As part of their negotiation, they have always said that, look, if the federal government does not implement the minimum wage as discussed, they are going to embark on strike at the end. They are giving them till May 31st of last month,
right,
that they want to see the implementation of the minimum wage before. So they have met up the 15 minimum of 15 days notice.
Okay, so
I don't really understand the purpose of that provision of section 41 as referenced by the Attorney General.
Okay, so I guess that's that about that for now. It's a full day. So
and the issue of industrial court, and the issue of the fact that the case is in industrial court. The case in industrial court between Labour and the federal government was the issue of the increment in the removal of fuel subsidy, and not on the wage, not on the dispute about minimum wage. So what the federal government took to the industrial court was the strike as a result of the removal of fuel subsidy. And so it is quite different from what they are talking right now. What was in court was the issue of strike on the fuel subsidy and not on minimum wage.
All right, so let's talk about the main issue now, which we're having this conversation. And of course, Bukola is starting off this one. Bukola.
Yes, thank you, Kadi. Well, beyond okay, let's just go straight to the conversation. And I'm going to start with you in our Lagos studios. The essence of this conversation is how we concentrate on the federal government and its responsibilities. And in the last 1 week, we've been talking about assessment, result, effort, and what to allocate. But really, the responsibility of the state government vis-a-vis the local government should also come into focus. And I took time to look at some of the budgets of some states, and they talk about prioritizing infrastructure and human capital development. In your own opinion, are you seeing the result of that investment, particularly in the last 20 plus years of democracy, the result of prioritizing human capital development at the subnational level on the economies, so to speak?
Well, thank you, Bukola, for that question. I would say that indeed the political leadership at the subnational level do get away with a lot of things. And again, to reiterate what you said, there's attention on the federal government, on who is the president and who is the head of the government. But unfortunately, even where the president intends to push through his policies, through his appointees, they can't do much without working with relevant authorities at the subnational level. There is no place called the federal. I mean, in terms of inhabitants of Nigeria now, everybody resides at one state, in one community, at one local government or the other. So interventions are directed at those levels. When you then look at what has happened in the last 20 years, like you said, you see infrastructure gaps, you see development deficits, and then you wonder, where are the monies going? The policies that are being developed, whether by federal institutions or state institutions, what are they about? The objectives of these policies, what are they about? And again, is when you look at, for instance, let's pick on poverty, for instance. You have in 2022, the MBS, came about 133 million Nigerians being multidimensionally poor. 33% of that number, about 44 million Nigerians, are concentrated in 10 states. Those 10 states, when you look at it, you have 8 of those states are in northern Nigeria, 2 of them are in southern Nigeria, and those 2 are Bayelsa and Ebonyi. When you look at Bayelsa, for instance, Bayelsa in 2022 had revenue, not budget, revenue of more than 300 billion. Revenue. That was before subsidy was removed. Revenue now to states have shot up maybe 200, some cases 250, 300%. Why would you have the level of poverty that you have in Bayelsa, a state where you have just 8 local governments? What's the population? But again, is that when you then look at what states are spending on, these 10 states that I mentioned now, you have Sokoto leading, you have Taraba somewhere there, you have Zamfara, you have Yobe, you have, the likes. Now, when you look at what they are spending on, and each of these states have maybe an average of 100 billion naira a year, they are not spending more than 10% on education. Not up to 10% on education. The combined, I'm talking about combined. In 2022, the total revenue that accrued to all the 10 states, I'm just picking on 10, about 1.5 trillion. And like I said, the removal of subsidies, so revenue has gone up. They are not spending up to 10% of their revenue on education, not up to 7% on healthcare, not up to 5% on agriculture. They are not spending up to 5% again on water. They are not spending up to 5% on transportation. And these are critical social issues that need to be dealt with when you are talking about poverty. So it then again is that what are the governors then spending on? And linking this up to what's happening with the labor now, I'm not averse to what Labour is canvassing for in terms of minimum. I mean, it needs to be reviewed. Everybody agrees when you look at the inflationary pressure in the economy. But I will ask you, after this minimum wage has now been agreed on, what happens? Because we always have this micro, analysis of issues. So when my space is taken care of, what happens? How many people are in the payroll of the government? How many people are even in the payroll of the private sector? I think those are the real issues. I'll give you a last example. Throughout last year or year before, we had ASU always on TV, screaming and shouting about the working condition. Now the working condition has been adjusted, really. Now, when last did you hear ASU say anything?
Well, they did say something last month.
I mean, what have they said about education? What have they said about healthcare? What have they said about agriculture? What have they said about transport? Have you heard ASU declared a strike, owing to the gap in the transportation sector?
Oh, I get it. But
those are the real issues. And that's what affects the common man. Like I said, how many people are on the payroll of the government? How many people on the payroll of the private sector? Many people, now we had to rebase the unemployment structure. We used to have it up there, but now we rebase it to 5% because the government then agrees that many people are self-employed.
Perhaps ASU is taking responsibility for its own space. It had spoken recently about, government's attempt to grant it autonomy, thereby taking away financial subsidies or subventions from it. And we've seen in the past how labor leaders, join in solidarity with ASU to protest. But let's take the conversation now to Mr. Mutu in our Abuja studio. Do you have the same observations about the same question in the last 20 years or so of democracy about investment of the subnationals? If they say that they're indeed prioritizing human capital development. Why are we not seeing the results?
Thank you so much. Good morning, Nigerians. A very, very important topic and a very important question here. And I agree to a large extent with Shegun on what he said. The question is, can the federal government alone deliver services to Nigeria? The answer is no. We practice a federal system of government where we have 3 tiers of government: the federal, the state, and local government. The Constitution clearly delineates responsibilities among these 3 tiers. Each of them is expected to provide specific services, and until the 3 of them effectively provide those services, we'll continue to maybe have gaps, and Nigerians will continue to suffer. But unfortunately, the federal government has a coordination role to play, and they have not been able to provide that role effectively. And that is why a lot of Nigerians continue to look up to the federal government. The federal government has also not been able to effectively frame the narrative for Nigerians to see clearly the role of the states, the roles of the local government in that service delivery value chain. And because of that, the responsibilities has largely lied with the federal government, and people continue to look onto the federal government without looking at the subnationals. But again, the federal government provides coordination role, like I said, and also have a responsibility to enforce compliance to the Constitution, where the state and the local government who are drawing revenue from the federal government are not using those resources effectively, especially the local government, where they draw huge amounts of revenue from the federation accounts, but nobody is seeing where those resources are used for. The federal government, until just recently, has the responsibility to ensure that those resources are accounted for and used judiciously. But 3 drivers that enhances good governance, that enhances effective service delivery, lies with the federal government. And that is why Nigerians will continue to look up to the first, the removal of fuel subsidy, which has impacted and maybe created a spiral reaction across the value chain, was championed by the federal government, which is not within the remit of the local state and local government. The devaluation of the currency was also done by the federal government, and this has impacted largely on the capacity of the state and local government to deliver services. Electricity, which is required by private sector, by businesses and Nigerians, also is largely, driven by the federal government. The failure of the federal government to effectively provide leadership across those 3 areas have continued to make the states to push the narrative and push the blame to the federal government. And until the federal government is able to, effectively drive those 3 factors and make sure that there is effective electricity, there is also good exchange rates, across the country, and also provide safety net for the fuel subsidy regime, Nigerians will continue to suffer at that level. Shegun did say that most of the states, their revenue has increased over the last 1 year due to the removal of fuel subsidy. I agree. But also, we must also remember that due to the removal of fuel subsidy and the devaluation of the country, the purchasing power of those resources, those revenue, has also reduced. If a state government was constructing a kilometer of road with 10 million in 2023, with the removal of subsidy and the inflation, that 10 million can no longer construct that same level of kilometers of road. So while the volume of money and the quantum of money going to the states and local government has increased, the purchasing power has reduced. And that is why labor is justified to go on strike and ask for increments in the minimum wage.
All right. All of these issues are tied, really, and let's just bring some updates on the situation across the country. We've brought updates from River State, from Benue, but here in Lagos, concerning aviation, we understand that the gate of the Murtala Mohammed Airport 2 in Lagos is being occupied as we speak, and quite a number of passengers are stranded with the luggage in hand as aviation unions locked the gate. So we understand that staff and passengers have no access into the terminal as the nationwide strike begins. We also understand that it's same situation in the nation's capital, Abuja, the Nnamdi Azikiwe Airport, and we hear that inside the Abuja airport terminal is empty, no staff, and airline stands, they're empty as well, that there are few passengers at one of the entrances there. The gates are locked, so obviously pilots cannot get in. So that is the situation in Abuja. Same in Lagos, where we understand that the gate is locked. That's where we're at right now. This strike clearly is crippling a lot of things. We know a lot of business people want to maybe travel for business appointments, strike some deals and the rest, but that is clearly not happening. So I'll come to you, Mr. Giwa. It looks like now is a time to maybe have the tough conversations, and that's what we're doing on the show this morning. Is this really a legal issue? Because the president has now gone to court, or at least the federal government has gone to court to get some sort of interpretation for this. Is this a legal issue or just a common sense issue? Let's sit down and say, what should it be? What does the Constitution say? Is it clear enough? What works for us as a nation? I don't know. Should we spend time really going to court back and forth? Because the former administration sort of did the same thing, and we're where we are right now with the NFIU guidelines and the rest.
Well, it's, like I said before, it's just unfortunate that we are at this point. It is actually not a legal issue. It is only in Nigeria, to the best of my knowledge, that you go to court for almost everything. You go to court when your wife is not listening to you. You go to court when you cannot pay your school fee. You go to court for almost everything, and you put a lot of pressure, in the courts, in the court system. Courts are not to solve political and economic issues. They are to just look at legal issues and interpretation of the Constitution. I mean, the facts before us are just clear. And if you look at it, the labor union and the federal government had an MOU, and even the Attorney General, a representative of the Attorney General, was not even there. I mean, to the best of my knowledge, the document I saw, I didn't see any representative, any signature from the office of the Ministry of Justice. And now when the Attorney General wants to go to court, to do what? To interpret what? I mean, these are factual issues. I think that the issue should be more political than being legal. Let us not draw I mean, if you give an order, the court cannot give an order that will not be enforceable. The court cannot just, you cannot make mockery of the court. I mean, are you going to go to court to ask for an order telling the labor leaders to go to court, when even in some cases, the government themselves do not even obey court orders? I mean, you can see what's happening everywhere in Kano and all of that. So I think that the Attorney General should be circumspect, and the government should look at this issue and solve it politically, bring the labor union to the round table, and ensure that people like the Attorney General and Nigeria Bar Association be involved in this negotiation so that they can ensure compliance. The government can always comply with agreements. The problem the labor union have always said is that government has never respect argument. Government never respect agreement. They don't stay committed to the agreement. If you, government, you are not committed to your agreement, what are you going to do with the courts? So that is the major problem. So it is never a
my apologies, Mr. Agiwa. My apologies, please. Because of time, we're just trying to race as much as possible. We will like to cross over to Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, to get an update of what is going on as far as the strike action is concerned in Ibadan. Our correspondent, Bukola. Bukola, thank you so much. Maybe give us an update quickly as to what is the level of compliance where you are.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm reporting live from Ibadan, the Oyo State capital. We have been to the NLC Secretariat this morning to see whether the usual gathering will be present there, but the place looks deserted. We spoke to the Secretary of the NLC earlier on, and he did confirm that the strike is on and is effective. So to confirm this, we are currently at Anglican Commercial Grammar School, Total Garden, here in Ibadan. And we met a few of the students who are still, just returning home. And some of them who spoke off camera told us that they were not even aware that there was going to be a strike, but they got here this morning and the teachers had to turn them back. If you can see behind me, there are quite a number of the teachers that we can see discussing in groups just under that building right behind me. So none of them is speaking to us, but of course, it looks like the strike is effective. I'm aware that about 11 other unions have keyed into this, including Vis-a-Vis, the banking unions and all that. So we have gone to a few banks. It looks like there are skeletal services ongoing. But as the day progresses, we'll find out whether they too have keyed properly into the strike. But for schools, there's no show here in your state.
Bukola, thank you for your reporting. We must leave Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, and go to the FCT and find out how things are playing out there also as far as the strike is concerned. Our correspondent, Dele Omoyeni, joins us now. Hello, Dele. Report to the FCT.
All right, good morning, guys. Well, it's not looking so good. As Kayode is we the Federal Secretariat here in Abuja, and I can assure you that there is indeed no, it's not a protest. So you don't expect the workers to hit the streets and start protesting. It's a strike. And that has already started. Nation's capital here in Abuja. That as at 12 midnight, that was the early hours of this morning, of course, electricity workers down too. So the lights went off, and that has happened. All the affiliates for the NLC and the CC are all keyed into this strike. I know the recently left us to Sanu, the recently left us to are complying with this strike. But this is the Federal Secretariat here in Abuja, and indeed it's been shut out. You just see a couple of people coming in and going out, but workers are not allowed to go in to the premises, guys.
Dele, thank you so much for reporting. Apparently, we don't have the luxury of time. There's a lot we want to talk about. But we're literally out of time. So, of course, we'll be bringing you all of those updates on Sunrise Daily, as well as our news bulletin at about 11, as every other program, as much as this strike goes on. But we must thank our guests right here. Thank you so much for coming on the program for the latest time we had to talk to you. Olusegun Lemon, Executive Director, I should say, Paradigm Leadership Support Initiative, joined us from our Lagos studio. Mr. John Mutu, National Coordinator, Democracy Vanguard, and Mr. Victor Giwa, Legal Practitioner, both joining us from our Abuja studio. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on the program. All right, so, well, that's it for us right here. And, of course, we're following up developments across the country. The strike has started. As Dele said, it's not a protest, so there's no marching on the street. It's just basically a strike action. So you'll not see workers in government institutions. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jeffrey Uzoma.
Of course, we'll be back again tomorrow. God bless Nigeria. I am Bukola Koka.
Well, let's keep our head up high. Let's fix our nation, absolutely, and have a great day as much as we can. I'm Kayode Kikele, and Sunrise is next. Stay with us.